Hello and welcome back once again for yet another video in this series. And this video is actually going to be speaking about function overloading. I guess the video number 3 in the series speaks about the basics of functions, and I would recommend you to actually watch that video first. It's around like 30 to 45 minutes long video which explains what exactly are functions and why do we need functions and how we are actually going to make use of functions by writing some small code snippets. So first watch that, get some hands-on programming exercises, and then actually come and watch this video, which is going to be about like what is function overloading, why do we need it. Now before we actually get into the actual definitions of function overloading, I would like to show you some simple programs using functions, just like a revision of functions. So I'm not going to be explaining the details of what are functions and why do we need functions, but just let's get started with a simple program where we try to use functions. So let me name a class, the name say class shapes, and close the bracket over here, and I have to create a main function which is public static void main. Remember, I don't need any command line arguments over here because I am not going to work with command line arguments in any of the programs from quite a long time. Okay, now what are we going to do in this program? I don't know, I just have to think right now. Let's write a program using functions which will allow the user to actually find out the area of some basic shapes, like say like a circle, say a square, a rectangle, or triangle, or whatever. So this program should allow a user to compute the shapes of some compute the area of some basic geometric shapes. Let me write a function for that. Void find area. Okay, find underscore area is more meaningful. Okay, find area is the name of my function, and I actually pass the length and breadth of a triangle. Sorry, length and breadth of a rectangle. Length and int length and breadth of a rectangle. Say this function is to compute the area of a rectangle. Typo. Fine. It's not returning anything, so return type is going to be void. Now let me actually print the message. It's taking 2 arguments from wherever it is being called. It just needs 2 arguments, the length and the breadth. System.out.println. It has to display the message to the user. The area of a rectangle is, we have to compute it right here. So what would I do here is like just enlarge this editor, length multiplied with breadth. So I'm computing it here and displaying it to the user right over here. That's all my function does. That's it. Nothing great. Now let me write another function. Which finds out the area of a circle. Let me not do that right now. Okay, fine. Let's try to execute this program. And let us see what is going to happen over here. So let's not write another function which finds out the area of a circle, but let's just try to run this program and see what happens here. Let's try to run the same program and see what happens. I'm not writing another function. I'm just going to create an object and I'm going to call that function. Object name is going to be, it has to be like class name first, shapes, followed by, I want to create a rectangular object. Rectangular object 1 is equal to new shapes of. That's it. I've created my first object and the name of my object is rectangular object. Fine. Okay, fine. Rectangular object 1. What am I thinking? Alright, fine. I do this now. I actually want to find out the area of my rectangle. So what do? I say rectangular obj1 dot find area. I need to pass the sides. Say one side of my rectangle is 10 centimeters, the other side is going to be 20 centimeters, 10 and 20, and the area is going to be like 200 centimeters square. So the area of the rectangle is it's supposed to compute and print it as 200. That's all. This is a very simple program using functions. And the next step, I'm going to explain why do we need something called as overloading and what exactly happens when we overload functions. Let's compile this. No syntax errors, close it, and let's call the main function. See, the area of the rectangle is 200. Let me clear it, close it, open the editor, say, let me actually give some spacing over here. Yeah, this is good. Now, what if I actually need to create an object of type circle, and I want to actually find out the area of the circle. So what do? I need to first define another function which is going to compute the area of a circle. Compute the area of a circle. Now the return type is going to be void because I'm printing the answer right in the function find area. Now observe, the most important thing what happens in function overloading is I am trying to define another function which is having the same name called as find underscore area as that of the previous function. I am not writing another function with a different name, find area of a circle. No, I'm just writing another function with the same name called as find area. But what do I need to find the area of a circle? I need the radius. So I say float radius. I want my radius to be of the floating point number. And now let me compute the area and display to the user inside this function. The area of let me make it's more appropriate. The area of the circle is, it's going to be pi r square. So this is going to be 3.142 multiplied with radius and multiplied with radius. So pi r square is done here. Now how do I actually invoke this function? Mind you, both the functions are of the same name. This is exactly called as function overloading. When you define two functions of the same name, it's called as function overloading. But when you actually create an object, when you create another object, say shapes circle, I'm creating my circle object, circle underscore obj1, my first circle object, which is equal to new shapes of. I hope you are pretty much aware of creating an object. I'm not going to explain like why objects. This is not a video session on classes and objects. So I assume that you know how to create objects and what do you mean by classes and objects. And then I'm straight away actually going into the step of creating objects. I've created my first circle object. Now how do I actually call this function where I compute the area of a circle? Fine, let me show it here. So circle underscore obj dot find underscore area. But I'm going to pass the radius this time. My radius is going to be say 12.5 or 12.4, whatever it is. Now let me compile the program. Circle underscore obj1. Yeah, it's obj1. Compile it. We compile with verbose to get full output. What is this? Warnings from, okay, float radius. Do I have to actually keep it as like double here? I think double would take care of the problem. Let me keep it as double here and let me compile it. No syntax errors. Fine. Close it. Let me call the main function. See, the area of the rectangle is 200 and area of the circle is 483.11392. Yes, let's actually calculate it using let's verify it using the calculator. Okay, so we passed our radius. We passed the radius as 12.4. It's 12.4 multiplied with 12.4 multiplied with 3.142. Fine, see, it's 483.11392. So it has in fact taken the radius what we gave as an input. Clear it, close it. Let's get back to the program. Now the idea is like, how did the compiler know which function to call. Both the functions have the same area. Both the functions have the same area. So I mean to say both the functions have the same name. There are two functions over here. This function find area and this function find area. But one function is actually computing the area of a rectangle. Another function actually is computing the area of a circle. But how is it identifying which one to call? That's the trick. That's the trick. That's the hidden part in function overloading. The compiler or your computer identifies which function to call. I would say the compiler is an appropriate word, not a computer. The compiler identifies which function to call based on number of arguments. How many arguments are we passing here when we say find area? We are passing 2 arguments. So it will look out. Where are the 2 arguments? Where is find area? I'm confused. Which find area to call? It sees which one to match. This is having 2 arguments and this is also having 2 arguments. This is of type int. This is also of type int. So let me actually call this one, and it jumps over here. It jumps the moment it actually encounters this statement. It decides during runtime which one to call, either this one or this one. Obvious choice is going to be this one, whichever I've highlighted in the yellow thing. So it's going to call this one because it has 2 arguments of type integer, and I'm actually passing 2 arguments of type integer. Now after computing the area of the rectangle, now when the control flow of the program comes to circle underscore obj1 dot find area of 12.4. Again I'm using the same function find area, but which one does the compiler, Java compiler or your BlueJ, which is running behind the scene, the compiler is running behind the scene over there, how does it decide during the runtime which function to call? It will see how many arguments am I passing. Am I passing 2 argument or 1 argument? I am passing only 1 argument. So which is that function with just 1 argument? This one. So it will automatically call this one. This is how function overloading happens. You can have any number. You can even have 100 different function definitions of the same name. Find area, find area, find area. As long as the number of arguments are different, and as long as you pass the right kind of arguments over here, the right number of arguments over here, it's going to get called. Now let me actually try to show what cannot be done in function overloading. Let me actually define another function with the same name, find underscore area, and let me say int, say side, in size. Yeah, fine. I'm defining this area with an idea of finding the area of a square. Find the area of a square. So let me do the computation of the area over here. The area of the square is its size multiplied with size. It's basically the size of one side. Say size multiplied with size. So it's just nothing but a square, where a is going to be the size of one side of the square. I don't want to call it length or breadth because both are the same. Now let me try to create another object, shapes square underscore obj1. I'm creating my first square object, and let me actually try to call it now. So square underscore obj1, let me try to call that function find underscore area, and let me say 10 centimeters is going to be the size of my square. So ideally, now what's happening is there are 2 functions, one function which is taking a data of type double, another function which is taking data of type int. Now let us see whether a compiler is clever enough to identify which function to actually call based on the type of the arguments, even though the number of arguments for these 2 functions, the circle, so let me call it as, so there are 2 functions over here, one which is going to compute the area of a circle, another function which is going to compute the area of a square. But both of them are having single argument, but the type of the argument is varying. This also has 1 argument, this also has 1 argument. Okay, but the type of this argument is going to be double, whereas the type of this argument is integer. Now let us see whether it's going to call the appropriate function based on the type of arguments. Let's see it. Until now I've been telling you function overloading works only based on the number of arguments and not based on the type. Now let's verify that. No syntax errors. Well, close it. Now let's call the main function. See, it's calling it perfectly fine. So what did you learn now? So it works even with, as long as the type of the data is different. It's of type int, this is of type double. So function overloading works perfectly fine. Function overloading works perfectly fine as long as the number of arguments are different, or the type of the arguments are different, or a combination of both. It can be a combination of both. Now let's write another function. Let's write another function to find the area of a rectangle. Find the area of a triangle. So what is the formula for finding the area of a triangle? It's going to be, half into base into height. So let me copy the structure here. Find area. So I need base. Now let me make the height of type double. So area of the triangle is it's like 0.5 multiplied with base into height. It's half into base into height. Half into base into height. Fine. Now I have to create another object. Shapes. It's a triangle object. Now let me actually initialize, let me try to call the function triangle underscore obj1 dot find underscore area. I need to pass the base. Now what is the type of the base I've given here? Base is of type int and height is of type double. So I say the base is 10 and say the height actually is 5.5. See, this is very important. If I have to make sure it's calling in correctly, I have to make sure if this is defined as double over here, I have to pass the argument which is also of type double. The second argument is of type double over here. I'm actually passing the second argument while calling the function here. In this, the second argument, I'm passing it as double. If I accidentally pass 5, it will not call this function. It will see there are two arguments first. First it will try to check the number of arguments and then the type of the arguments. So there are two arguments. It will see whether should I call this function which is computing the area of the triangle, or should I call this function. It's confused now. It doesn't know. But how does it decide? It decides whether the number of arguments are the same. Yes, there are two arguments for this function as well as there are two arguments for this function. You can see this one where I'm shaking the cursor. Yeah, both of them have two arguments. Which one to call? It will decide based on the type. If I pass 5.5, 5.5 is a floating point number. I've declared this as double, so it will default call this function. If I define this, if I call it as 5, find area dot 5, it's going to call this function. So hope this is clear to you. So let me actually show it to you with an example. I'm passing it as 5.5. Compile it. No syntax errors. Close it. Call the main. See the area of the. Let me clear the previous outputs. Let me close it. Let me rerun the program once again. See the area of the rectangle is 200. Circle, square, and triangle. Triangle. Now let me make a small modification. Instead of 5.5, if I call it as 5, it's not going to compute the area of the triangle. The reason being, if we need to calculate the area of the triangle, we need to call this function. But if we need to call this function, we have to use the argument of the same type. It's of double. I have to say 5.5 or 5.6 or any number which is basically a decimal number over here. Now what happens if I use two integers over here? These two are integers. Find area. Two arguments. How many functions are there with two arguments? There is one function with two arguments. There's another function with two arguments. Which one to call? What are the type of the arguments? Both are integers. What is the signature of the arguments over here? Both are of type integers. Default, call this. So let's see what will happen. Which one to call? If it calls, if we assume that this statement is actually going to call this function, we have to get the output as the area of the triangle is so and so, but that will not happen. Close it. Call main. See, the area of the rectangle is 50. Which function has it called now? It is now called this one, the first function, where both the arguments of type integers. So this is all about function overloading, nothing much. This is not rocket science. So function overloading is all nothing but you can define the functions, any number of functions with the same name, but they have to vary with the number of arguments or the type of arguments or the combination of both. You can have like the same number of arguments but of different types, or you can have same type of argument but different in number. Alright, so hope this video cleared your doubts about why you need function overloading and why and how can you actually achieve function overloading. Why do we need function overloading? Because I can use the same name even though I create different objects. This is a rectangle object, this is a circle object, this is a square object, this is a triangle object. The name of the function is going to be the same. Only what I pass into the function varies, and how the function is going to compute the data is different based on different function definition, but the name of all the function is going to be the same. This is function overloading. Why function overloading actually is supposed used, it's a bit complicated, and I don't want to make the video very long because this is just for the purpose of revision. Probably if I get time, I will make another video to explain with a real world scenario, like where exactly in building complex software systems we have to use function overloading. So let me keep that for a different video. As of now, just know what is function overloading, how do we achieve it, and how to work with it. That's it for now. Hope it was useful for you. Let me, stop the recording. Alright, goodbye for now. Catch you up again in yet another video.